Hi, I'm Zane Howard, and I'm from Maryville, Tennessee. I'm currently packing a bowl and playing Marvel Rivals. This podcast was recorded at
5:18 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, April 16th, 2025.
By the time you're hearing this, the news may have changed. But then again, the captain's curse could have claimed me again.
Hello and welcome to the MUNPR Politics Podcast. I'm Caleb Lance, your host and vice president for the next 2 weeks. This is the third in a four-part series on the 2025 UTK MUN elections, and in today's episode we're going to be analyzing the results from our third round of polling, the first since nominations have begun. If we were to put it into an analogy to a real U.S. election, we've just finished up the primaries and now we're headed into the general election. We're going to start from the bottom of the ballot and work our way up like we will on election night. So first we'll take a look at the polling for Ethan Lindsey's confirmation as Secretary General of MUN 11. Ethan has continued to put up Mao Zedong numbers here, maintaining his 100% support from last week. MUNPR's crack team of election analysts has officially called this race for Ethan Lindsey, to the surprise of nobody at all. Next up, we'll jump to the Communications Director poll. Now that we've moved past the open ballots, several races were shaken up, including Comms Director. As of right now, there are 5 candidates for Comms Director: Junior Mary Helen Scow, and first years Reagan Murphy, Jenny Lynn, Lauren Turner, and Avery Sinclair. Unfortunately, I was mistakenly under the impression that Turner had decided to run for membership chair after she was nominated for all 4 offices, but that is not the case. She has not yet made a decision and is still an official candidate for all 4 offices. The final poll next week will have her listed for all 4 positions, but this week she was only listed for membership chair. Again, my mistake. Last week, Scow led the pack at 50% support overall, while Lynn trailed at 18.8%, and Murphy and Sinclair tied with 6.3%. The consolidation of the field generally seems to have hurt Scow and benefited her opponents, as Scow fell to 28.6%, surpassed by Lynn, who received 42.9% support this week. Murphy and Sinclair also improved their numbers to 21.4% and 7.1%, respectively. As always, we'll save the demographic information for the end, so if you want more detailed information on the candidate's support basis, be sure to stick around. Looking at membership chair polls, we can see that it was also profoundly altered by the narrowing of the field. The most popular candidate from last week, Tristan Fields, dropped out of the running to instead seek the presidency, leaving a vacuum at the top of the race, especially since Not Sure was the second most popular option last week. Turner has benefited the most by far from the winning of the field, shooting up from 12.5% support last week to an outright majority of 64.3% this week. Sinclair also benefited, rallying from her collapse last week to a strong second place at 21.4% this week. Our newcomer candidates, sophomore Ella Esser and Not Sure, each received 7.1% support this week. Esser is mounting her first campaign for club office and was Jaden Sloss's GA co-chair at 10-1-1 and Dollywood chair at Vol 10. Apologies, I do not know the committee topic for her 10-1 committee. The staffing sheet simply lists the name of that committee as committee. Looking at the vice presidential race, membership chair Barnett has continued his week-after-week improvement to his already dominant numbers, going from 56.3% support last week to a supermajority of 85.7% this week. His 2 remaining opponents, Secretary General Howard and Will St. Clair, each slightly improved their numbers to 7.1% support this week, and the unsure voters seem to have made up their mind as that option did not receive any support this week. The top of the ballot also was shaken up quite a bit by the narrowing of the field. Last week, Fields was at the front of a crowded field with 37.5% support. His closest opponent, membership chair Barnett, dropped out of the race to focus on his vice presidential candidacy, and several other minor candidates have also exited the race, consolidating support behind 2 frontrunners. Fields increased his numbers to a respectable 50%, but first-year outreach coordinator McQueen has done the same. Ward lost the 6.3% support he had last week, cementing the presidential race as a dead heat, at least for now. It would be difficult, but certainly still possible, for Ward to mount a comeback, but if he manages to draw enough support away from Fields and McQueen to prevent an outright majority, he and his voters could easily play the role of kingmaker. Or queenmaker. Currently only 2 amendments have been submitted for consideration, both written by yours truly. If you'd like an explanation of the amendments, along with my 2 cents about why I think they're a good idea, check out Episode 2. The Vice Presidential Travel Fee Amendment, henceforth Amendment 1, is currently supported by 35.7% of respondents, while 21.4% are unopposed and another 42.9% are undecided. As a reminder, amendments must receive the support of at least 66.7% of voters to be ratified and added to the Constitution. Amendment 2, the amendment to codify the Junior Crisis Director Program, is supported by 64.3% of respondents, while the other 35.7% are still undecided. Moving on to the demographic information, we can get a more detailed breakdown of the candidates' support. As a reminder, these questions were all optional, so don't be surprised if some of the numbers don't add up. For example, there was at least one instance of a candidate receiving support from someone who provided no information about themselves beyond their voting preferences, so their class rank, voting history, etc. is unknown and therefore not recorded. This week, all respondents indicated they were dues-paying members, so we won't look at those since they're identical to the overall numbers. Instead, we'll look at class, time in the club, last election voted in, and the candidate the respondents voted for each office in the last general election. We'll also flip the way we look at the data from the previous weeks. Instead of going by office, we'll go by demographic. So first years favor Lynn for communications director by a 40-point margin, Turner for membership chair by the same margin, unanimously support membership chair Barnett for vice president, and slightly prefer first-year outreach coordinator McQueen for president at 60-40. The sophomores favor Scow for communications director by a 40-point margin, and clearly support Turner for membership chair at 80% in favor and 20% undecided. For vice president, they prefer membership chair Barnett at 80%, though Secretary General Howard received 20%. The sophomores reversed the first year's presidential margin, preferring Fields to FYOC McQueen in a 60-40 split. Only one junior responded to this week's poll, and they're planning to vote Lynn for communications director, Turner for membership chair, St. Clair for vice president, and Fields for president. Seniors aren't yet backing any one clear candidate for communications director, and a third of their support has each gone to Murphy, Sinclair, and Lynn. 2/3 of seniors support Sinclair for membership chair, while 1/3 support Turner, and membership chair Barnett is the unanimous support of the senior bloc for vice president. In an unexpected reversal, first-year outreach coordinator McQueen is the most popular presidential candidate among seniors, winning 2/3 of the vote, while Fields received 1/3. Looking at the number of semesters spent in the club, we can see that Lynn's support tends to inversely correlate with time spent in the club, as her highest numbers are 50% with 1 and 2 semester munners, and her lowest is 0% among 7 and 8 semester munners. Scow's biggest base of support seems to be the middle ground of 3 to 4 semester munners, where she received 40% support, and Murphy's popularity seems to increase alongside time spent in the club. Turner has at least 50% support among every demographic of time in the club for membership chair, but her closest opponent varies from group to group. The second favorite candidate of 1 to 2 semester voters is Sinclair at 16.7%. Among 3 to 4 semester voters, it's a tie between Sinclair and Esser at 20%. And among 7 to 8 semester munners, it's once again Sinclair at 50%. Barnett has the unanimous support of munners who have been in the club for either 1 or 4 years, while among those who have been in the club for 2 years, he has 60% support, with 20% each going to his opponent. In the presidential race, 1 to 2 semester munners are dead tied, 3 to 4 semester munners favor McQueen by a 60-40 margin, and 7 to 8 semester munners are also dead tied. Generally, the more recently a munner is voted, the more likely they are to support Lynn for communications director, while Scow's strongest demographic is those who last voted in the 2024 comms director special election, likely due to the fact that was the last time she appeared on the ballot. Those who haven't voted in a year, or ever, overwhelmingly favor Murphy for communications director, and Sinclair does strongest among those who voted for the last time sometime last semester. Looking at the membership chair race, Turner leads among those who last voted in the 2024 first-year outreach coordinator or communications director special elections, while Sinclair is the favorite of those who haven't voted since last April, and Esser of those who have never voted. In the vice presidential race, Barnett leads unanimously among every demographic except for 2024 FYOC voters, where St. Clair received 16.7% support. In the presidential race, there is a clear trend wherein the more recently someone is voted, the more likely they are to support McQueen, while the opposite is true for Field. There are exceptions to this, but the rule generally holds true. The candidates for the last communications director election were Chloe Randolph, the winner, and Sanaya Thomas. Nobody indicated this week that they had voted for Thomas in the last election, but there were several Randolph 24 voters who responded. 40% of them support Lynn, while 20% each support Scow, Sinclair, and Murphy. For the 2024 membership chair general election, the candidates were Nathaniel Barnett, the winner, and Tristan Fields. Turner has a strong base of support among both Barnett and Fields' 24 voters, with 66.7% support among Barnett voters and 50% among Fields voters. Sinclair has the remaining 33.3% of Barnett voters and 50% of Fields' 24 voters. The 2024 general election vice presidential candidates were Caleb Lance, the winner, Zane Howard, and Ryan Hahn. This week, nobody who voted for Howard or Hahn in 2024 filled out the poll. Barnett has the unanimous support of Lance's 24 voters, and he has retained the unanimous support of those who voted for him for membership chair last April. Interestingly, he also has the unanimous support of those who voted against him for membership chair last April. And lastly, the candidates for president last April were Ahmad Bahar, the winner, Jonah Dittus, and Eli Habersetzer. No Dittus voters responded to this week's poll, but we did have responses from Bahar and Habersetzer voters. Generally, Bahar 24 voters tend to favor Fields, while Habersetzer 24 voters tend to favor McQueen. Fields does notably have the unanimous support of his 2024 membership chair voters, while those who voted for Barnett for membership chair are so far unanimously backing McQueen. Though we have narrowed down the race to only the officially nominated candidates, these polls are still entirely dependent on the honor system, and it's very likely that one or more of them will be very inaccurate. To the candidates who have come out ahead in this week's poll, congratulations, but know that the race is not over yet. The tortoise won when the hare stopped just before the finish. And to those who are disheartened, you still have hope. The last week is always the most interesting. And besides, since we use ranked choice voting, you don't have to be the most popular candidate to win, you just have to be the least unpopular. You may only get 2 or 3 first choice votes, but still end up as the winner. Last, I have to give you my sincerest apologies, as I will have to delay the communications director and membership chair interviews by 1 week. I had originally planned to release those alongside this episode and have the vice presidential and presidential interviews with next week's episode, but I was not able to interview all the candidates in time. Instead, the interview for all 4 offices will be released alongside next week's episode. To avoid bloating the runtime, it'll probably just be a separate episode, and it'll just link to a playlist of all the episodes. Make sure to tune in next week when I'll have the interviews with each of the candidates in addition to the final polls. I'm Caleb Lance, your host and vice president, and thank you for listening to the MUNPR Politics Podcast.